My first question is a little bit lengthy, so let me read it. This person says, I was reading a blog post from a lady that teaches biblical womanhood. And while I normally agree with her on most things, a recent post from her seemed to border on legalism. She was saying that because of the following verse out of 1 Timothy, wives are to be silent in Sunday school unless the class is women only. And if wives do have a question, they should ask their husbands at home. So let me go on and finish this. While I know that there's a battle to maintain scriptural teaching, my concern is this is leaning towards legalism. I look forward to hearing what your response is. Thank you for giving us this forum to ask questions such as these. Let a woman learn quickly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach, to exercise authority over man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. So first of all, let me read a passage out of 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, Paul says this. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 34. The woman should be silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but are to submit themselves, as the law also says. So we see it in 1 Corinthians 14:34, where Paul says a woman should be silent in church. And then I believe the passage that you're referring to, 1 Timothy, let me get there. 1 Timothy chapter 2, here it is. 1 Timothy 2:11. A woman is to learn quietly with all submission, and I do not allow a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Instead, she is to remain quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And then Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and transgressed. So what the scripture teaches is this. Listen, this is a submission issue. When Adam and Eve sinned against God, God said that Eve's desire would be to rule over her husband, but yet she would be under him. And so we see that God's design for marriage is for the husband to be the spiritual leader of the home and for the wife to be his helpmate. So when it comes to that relationship between a husband and a wife, the husband has authority over the woman. And as we see here, the woman is to submit to the leadership of her husband. That's what the scripture teaches. So with that in mind, we come to that 1 Corinthians passage, 1 Corinthians 14:34, when Paul says that he does not permit women to speak in church, but they should ask their husbands. It's a submission issue. Now, before Paul says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, he says in the chapter before, and I think this is going to be helpful, he says in the chapter before in 1 Corinthians, 14, same chapter, he says this. So now, brothers and sisters, I have come to you speaking in other tongues. How will I benefit you unless I speak to you with a revelation or knowledge of prophecy or teaching? And so he talks about that. He talks about the issues of spiritual gifts and in tongues. So he says in verse 20, chapter 14, verse 20, brothers and sisters, do not be childish in your thinking, but be infants in regard to evil and adult in your thinking. It is written, I will speak to these people by people of their other tongue and by lips of foreigners, and even then they will not listen to me, says the Lord. Speaking in other tongues then instead is intended as a sign, not for believers, but for unbelievers. Now here's my point, is that Paul says in that passage, now brothers and sisters. And so then he begins to talk about the exercise of tongues, the gift of tongues in the church. He goes on to say this in verse 26. What then, brothers and sisters, whenever you come together, each one has a hymn, a teaching, a revelation, another tongue. My point is, he's talking about worship in the church and the use of spiritual gifts. And he says brothers and sisters. So Paul earlier says in chapter 14 that brothers and sisters both receive spiritual gifts, and they are to use them in the corporate worship of the church. So how in the world can Paul affirm women using their spiritual gifts in the church, but then at the same time say, I do not permit a woman to speak, but to be silent? Well, the issue is authority. In whatever she says and in whatever she does, she must remember that she's under the authority of her husband. And therefore, if what she does not find agreement with him, then she's to be silent. Now, the issue of Paul saying, I don't allow women to exercise authority over a man in teaching the word, well, that's pretty clear. Women are not to pastor churches. Women are not to be preachers. And women are not to teach men the Bible. I mean, it's pretty clear. So when Paul talks about, then he says, I do not permit them to exercise authority, but they're to keep silent. Again, the issue is understanding the headship of man, the authority that God has placed upon the Christian man, and the responsibility that his wife has in submission to him. So Paul is basically saying, if what you're doing is contrary to your husband's wishes, then you need to be silent and talk to him about it at home. But if you and your husband agree on the exercise of these spiritual gifts, and you understand at the end of the day that you're under his authority, then I don't think Paul is condemning a woman from speaking in church. Certainly you're to speak up in Sunday school class. And so I hope that's helpful. If you have more questions about that, feel free to ask.